I did my topic on the Syria crisis, and my name is Stephen Roberts. So, the Syria crisis started in March 2011, and it all kind of began from the arrest and torture of teens, which the teens did, they painted revolutionary slogans on building walls. This ended up leading to people wanting the president to resign, and the president is President Assad's. Ended up turning into a civil war, and approximately 250,000 people were killed. So this is just a picture showing the death rates and how many deaths were per month. You can see towards around January of 2012 is really when it started to really pick up and reached upwards of 6,000, which looks like the highest, 6,000 deaths. And then it starts to stay pretty high around 4,000 and then drops down to about 2,000 per month, which is still quite a bit, seeing that Syria has a very low population. So we had two main groups in this civil war. One is the rebel forces, and they controlled mostly the north region and some of the countryside throughout Syria, and also Damascus, which is the capital of Syria. They had some support or aid in this war, and it was from the United States, United Kingdoms, France, and Italy. They just supported the Syrian National Coalition, and they just tried to help them out throughout the war as much as they could, and helping them get resources such as food and water, and as I'll explain a little bit later on some of the things that the government and them took away or made very hard for them to get access to. So the other set of or the other side of this war was the loyalist forces, and that was mainly the government or people that supported the government. And they controlled mainly the big cities like Latika, Hama, Tortoise, and Homs. Not sure if I said any of those right, but they just controlled those, and they controlled the capital as well. They also did have some aid in this war, and that was from China and Russia. They just sent military support for the Syrian government and help aid weapons to them as well. Another big key in this war was the Islamic State, and they were actually formed in like allegiance with Al Qaeda, so they were part of Al Qaeda, or so what they thought, and they were on the side with the loyalist forces, so with the government, and they just kind of were on their team and more of an alliance with them, and they fought the rebel forces. Government forces were very key or pivotal times in this war, and some of the forces they used was murder, torture, rape, and suffering. But this also goes for the rebel forces as well. They also did use some of these. As you can see, the as earlier, the death rates that had increased throughout the war. And then the last one is genocide, and that is the government that they tried to destroy groups and political rivals. So they were trying to get rid of the rebel forces and get everyone to agree with the government and not like disobey them and whatnot. So the human crisis, this took a big toll on the Syrian communities. But we ended up having about 4.5 million fleeing the country and going to the neighboring countries like Turkey and Jordan, and some even went to Europe and covered some of those areas. We A lot of them were fleeing due to the government or um, the loyalist forces blocking any access they could find to food, drinking water, and health resources. And that was a big thing that you can't really live without. So they ended up fleeing. Um, they had about 13.5 million are still in Syria, but a lot of them are in unlivable conditions, or they had to move out of their old homes. We had They estimated about $3.2 billion to help aid or give minimal support to the people in Syria just for minimal drinking and living, just to help keep them alive from this past year in 2016. The government ended up refusing a lot of the humanitarian agencies to come help the Syrian people with food, water, and health resources. So that did cut a lot of their chance of survival or anything to live. And then also many civilians lived in hard to reach areas, so it was very hard to get and difficult to get resources out to them. And then again, around 400,000 ended up going to surrounding countries like Jordan and Turkey, and only about 10% ended up going to Europe um, to kind of get away from everything. And mostly it was women and children that ended up moving out because the men were fighting in the wars. One of the topics that we found in our Module 4 was religious conflict, and is a big key and is one of the central points and the most visible between wars and between groups. And one of the religious groups that we found was Al Nusra Front, which is a Syrian Islamic group that was they were part of the rebel forces, and they were ended up fighting in the wars.